we're delighted to be together this morning after Labor Day to be able to discuss and share the work of Geoff Dunn. The exhibit is called The World to Itself, and given the nature of the world outside, I think we're very fortunate to be able to focus on these fresh, spontaneous, and life-affirming paintings. During the past couple of weeks, the catalog for the exhibition has been arriving, and we've gotten innumerable comments related specifically to the energy and the energetic beauty that's in each piece. Wanted to welcome both Sam Bach, who is incredibly important to the gallery, and to the relationship with Geoff. Geoff, as many of you know, was a dear friend of Brother Thomas's, and Sue and I owned a painting of his that we had bought a number of years ago in Erie. And then I shared some recent slides of Geoff's with Sam a couple of years ago. And his response was so supportive and enthusiastic that we're now on our second show. So Sam, delighted that you're here. Mara, as ever, a joy simply to have you and your insights with your glasses on so that you'll be able to see and therefore be insightful. And Caroline, thank you so much for continuing to organize these things. The quote of Thomas's that I enjoy enormously and do refer to quite often is what is old and beautiful is always new, and what is beautiful and new is always old. And I think about that in the context of painting and painting of landscape per se, and having Geoff's work certainly reminds me of the capacity of or talent of an individual to alert us to the beauty that is around us, particularly in nature. So if we can begin with the first image, we'd love it, or actually the cover piece, because it really is one of the freshest, if not one of the most beautiful pieces in the show. And Geoff, I'm going to ask you to speak just a bit about this, and then we'll move on with other comments.
Yes, this is a I live near a state park. It's called the Peninsula or Presque Isle State Park. It's a lovely plume of land that goes about 7 or 8 miles out into Lake Erie. It had an extraordinary natural background in its creation. It was formed by the accumulation of tufts of cottonwood trees that coalesced and then accumulated branches, sand, pebbles, and eventually became a landmass. So the creation of this place was something somewhat sublime and unusual. And almost every day, I or my wife and I drive out there or go out there, and we always pass by this spot, which is in the most easternmost portion. And this is sort of a recurrent motif that's always fascinated me, which is reflections of the sky and water. And I believe it's because it's really the meeting of earth, water, and sky. It's really the totality of nature. It's real, but it's also very reflective, and the mirror images are always changing in every season. So it's an important idea to me, even though there are many iterations of this in my work over the last several years.
Sam, your thoughts about this particular work?
Well, I must say my thoughts about all the works resemble very much. And I would not like to go into the meaning of them, but on the making of them. There is, I mean, I am very fortunate to have a work of Geoff, which I see daily. And first of all, what I see in them is talent, incredible talent. And then I see in them incredible detail, specificity of thing. Nothing is painted in a kind of stereotyped way. When you look at this painting, when you look just at the outline that is shaped between the sky and the trees, I hear an entire melody playing out just in this line. When I look at the verticals, at the various lines that connect the items of this composition to the size of it, to the frame, to the space in which it is made, the painting sits there. It doesn't move from where it is. This requires an incredible talent for composition and the musicality of the brushstrokes. And they are so precise, and the tensions between the various distances, between the dark and the light. I mean, I enjoy this one painting of Geoff that I see on my wall every day, a few times a day, and I look and I can see the distances. I'm really speechless before your talent.
And that's an unlikely situation, Geoff, just as you should know.
And I have it for very few paintings. I mean, I feel something like this when I stand in front of a painting by Marquet, by Hopper of the Paris period, by Manet, of course, but even Velázquez, who painted in a very free way when he painted landscapes. El Greco. I mean, I have a certain feeling. I mean, I won't go into art history because it becomes an endless thing, and I don't want to occupy the screen. But from Patineer to Thibaut, I must say, the distance is enormous, but I can see components in everything. It is the specificity. It is not, it is the talent of making things look easy, simple, spontaneous, fresh, and very specific with very important details, where every brush stroke is what it has to be, like a violinist playing a big concerto, and every sound has to be what it has to be. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart.
So, Mara, would you like to add to that?
I don't think there's anything more to say. I think we can all go home now.
Right.
Quite frankly. But it's the freshness of Geoffrey's paintings. Like, yes, there's a beautiful composition, there's enormous talent, there's specificity, all the things that Samuel said. And yet there's a freshness and a deftness of touch in every single one of these paintings that like it's like the spirit and the hands. Were you a surgeon actually, Geoffrey? I know you were a doctor.
Yes.
Like, okay.
I was a surgeon.
It's in the hands. It's in, like, I'm sure you were an incredibly talented surgeon because you make the mark and it is the mark that needs to be met and it's not labored at all. And that's true in every single one of these paintings.
Most of what I've learned about painting, I learned in the operating room.
Well, there you have it.
Most of the painting I've done, particularly the volume of painting that I've done, it all occurred after my most active period in surgery. I had some training, I had some instruction, and I was lucky because I could not have had better mentors early on just to learn basic good habits of drawing and perspective and color and the use of paint. But most of the actual work came after considerable amount of time spent in the operating room. And to sum up that experience, it was you make as few moves as possible and you make every move count. So Sam has put his finger exactly on what is common to the principles of good surgery, and for me, what are the principles of my own painting.
It sounds wonderful, Geoff. You finish and then we're going to move on to the next one, but I do want to add something in a minute. Go ahead.
I more recently have seen a more general overlap of the principles of medicine and the principles of art, of painting, and painting in particular. And I'll get back to that later.
So let's move on then, Caroline. Caroline, I'd ask you, if you don't mind, just to respond to this particular piece, the sense for me of light and the almost dancing of the leaves throughout the entire piece
Yeah.
brings a lot of joy to me, and removes me from sometimes the day-to-day world that we all are confronted with in such a very special way. It's an invitation into a world unto itself. So Caroline, please.
This piece is a great example of something that I'm going to reiterate that pretty much Mara, Sam, and Geoff touched on, is the mark that's made is the one that needs to be made. And it does, I imagine, connect to being a surgeon and seeing things, not to overwork things. A lot of early artists knowing when to stop is one of the harder talents. You know, you can have talent, but knowing when to stop. And that's something I love about this work, all the works, is that it's not overworked. If anything, it's very tastefully underworked so that you can really engage with the paint, which this piece exemplifies to a great level, because it plays with being abstract, but also being very representational. And you almost have two paintings that, if you stare at it long enough, you can kind of go back and forth, that push and pull, and the sky can become a foreground because it's so bright, and then become something totally different than this, you know, probably like a tree trunk that's kind of been taken over by these vines. And then on top of that, you have the dancing of the color. The red just pops, and, you know, it reminds you of being outside and the leaves kind of moving. It gives great motion.
Sam, your thoughts?
This is one of my favorite painting, I must say, of this group, because it is simply magical. The question of creating an illusion, I would say the illusion of depth here, and the illusion of creating spaces which actually you cannot see, but you somehow know that they are there behind. And this is also one of the magic things of forgetting that this is oil and this is a canvas, and looking at the painting as if it were as an open space into which your eyes can kind of penetrate and travel. And it is the density, the incredible density of this painting, and yet it is all organized. I see here lines. I see here a geometry in it. I mean, it's not perchance that it works. I could talk about every point, every millimeter of this surface. It sings.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Mara?
Well, I put this one in because I just adore this painting. It is the perfect knife's edge between abstraction and representation. It just hovers right there. You can almost smell the fall, the cold, you know, blue sky, and then this moist undergrowth with the top of the changing leaves, the rustle, the dappled light that happens when you're in a place like this, the dampness, the crispness, and it's a tapestry, and you know, it just sends me, I have to say.
So Geoff, I think you get a rebuttal.
Well, this is sort of my favorite child of all of them. I go by this place every day on the way to one of the country properties. And fall is such a glorious time here. September and October are really the peak seasons for clarity of atmosphere, brilliance of color. And I literally jammed on the brakes in my car when I saw this, even though the irony, the paradox is this is all invasive vegetation that's growing everywhere. And despite that, there was such beauty in the sparkling and the color, that wonderful smell in the air. You know, this time you can make out Concord grapes, wood smoke. So I came right back and got to work on the scene. Cars are driving by, dust, cinders flying, but I had so much fun painting this, and it's one of my personal favorites as well.
It's
I
lovely
like
because
the abstractness and I like the ambiguity. and the uncertainty that's lurking behind those bright vines.
I think it's wonderful that the joy that you experienced, you're now able to share with others through your talent. And it comes out in such a profoundly attractive way for each one of us to look at the painting and to be engaged by it. The source of light, the way that that comes and goes with the piece, the depth, as Sam remarked, the sky, all of it seems to just sing in a particular way. And all the pieces, we're going to look at the next one, totally different scene, different place, different time, but also light here becomes incredibly, incredibly important. Sam, not that you want to have the snow removed from your driveway, but
Oh, this is again, I must say, I'm at a loss for of words to speak about this thing. But I must say, I'm as a painter, I'm a little biased to the concept of representation and abstraction. For me, every good piece of art is abstract and representational. I mean, a work of art becomes really good when it can be read as an abstraction. And there are abstractions that touch me very much, that for me become representational, of colors that try to integrate and shapes that try to say something to each other. So I mean, I think this is just simply a perfect painting, because again, the masses of dark, of light, of curves and straight lines and so on, they meet with this sense of the snow, of the huge amount of snow, and where the sky and the snow have the same density of light. It's it can be a Franz Klein, and it can be a Manet, and it's of course you. It's you. It's your incredible talent of creating it.
absolutely lovely. And Mara?
Well, I just agree with everything Sam says. I guess I always do.
No.
I'm sorry, but we can find some things we
But
disagree.
there's the sort of the charcoal brown black against the blue, and the sort of the tightness of the blue purple range in that, as opposed to complementary colors, reds bleeding out to oranges or greens. But I don't know, there's a range. So although it's cold and warm at the same time, so there's that brightness of the angle of the sun in the background and the angle of light hitting part of the snow, but then there's these sort of blue purple shadows that sort of bring you into the snow itself. That, I don't know, I just feel like you just get drawn into this very intimate space, although it's a pretty grand vista, but it's a very intimate viewing space.
I think it just seems to make me want to have winter show up early, in a wonderful way, and then make me more attentive to it, as a painting rather than just as nature. Geoff, you've done a wonderful job of inviting us into these spaces. The next piece we're going to look at, however, includes a structure which is somewhat unique in the works that we have shown over a period of time. And I'd love for you to talk about it because it has a character, and a presence in a wonderful way.
This is the potting shed, which has been part of my life ever since I first lived in the country at the age of 3. It was built in 1900. It was part of a large greenhouse that's long since disappeared, which it would be where the foreground, this is the back view of it. I actually lived here for a little while in the loft, and I think that established a more intimate connection with earth, the surrounding, the gardens. There was a rose garden in the past. And then more recently, it's taken on a new meaning just because we always called it the potting shed because that's where all the pots were for planting. And after getting to know Thomas, it took on a new sort of symbolic meaning in terms of the virtues of the value of solitude and the virtue of humility, something that I would hope to aspire to. And again, this is September, which is the most glorious time of year for light around here. It started right on schedule yesterday here. We have this brilliant, clear light. The relative humidity was probably 30, just stunning light. And this was sharing that kind of experience with some of the memories that I've alluded to. Again, there's mystery and there's a past to it.
Which is all helpful. And at the same time, your mention of Thomas and the potting shed brings to mind the importance of relationships in your own life, the way that you've invested in them and the way that you have been nourished by them. And certainly your friendship with Brother Thomas was critically important to him throughout all of his life, that you two knew one another, but also is in a way very nourishing to you and transformative. And we don't think about that in the context of looking at a work of art, but I do, especially with this called the potting shed, and thinking, I don't think Thomas would be hanging out there. But I do think that the reminder of him in your life and you in his life is a really very precious memory for me. And it's not only a memory, it's a very present experience that makes life even more meaningful. Sam?
Well, I would just add that having seen this painting, it reminded me what Delacroix said about ruins. He said, ruins are the return of the man-made into nature. And it is, ruin is a very important subject in the creation of landscapes, because ruins have furnished so many shapes and abstractions from Bellini on, where the rocks interested him much more than the face of the saint. So here is this integration of the man-made that falls apart with time and the overpowering nature that simply doesn't care, that doesn't give a damn about the humans and what they do. And you know, maybe what I'm saying are words of an atheist, and I'm not sure you share it with me, but this is what I feel.
Absolutely. Mara?
Well, it was interesting to me. There are a number of paintings with structures in them, which I had not seen before, and they're dilapidated to ruins. And then there was the tree, the September sunlight and vines that we looked at, and that kind of overgrowth, like a simple vine just trying to reach for the sun and trying to reach for the sun and hanging on and curling and hanging on and curling and growing, and the overhang here and the sort of dying stalks in the foreground, where the fecundity of nature is just overpowering these structures, but it is also sort of always present in your work. These are not, you know, sublime little glades of prettiness. They're growth oriented, maybe even overgrowth.
There is no prettiness, absolutely.
Yeah. Good.
We had mentioned earlier, you know, where much of technique was informed by my experience with surgery. As far as sentiment is concerned, that was informed by my second medical career that followed surgery. And that was in hospice and palliative care, where I had daily reminders in thousands of different ways of the mortality and the beauty in mortality, particularly as life is coming to an end. I know that's part of the reason I'm so drawn to dilapidation, fall, ruined buildings. It's a direct extension of that clinical experience over the last 30 years.
But within the clinical experience, you as a physician were also attempting to enhance or give life back to others as best you could, at the same time witnessing the reality of death. And so I think there's that sort of push me, pull you in all of us. And certainly as age continues to creep up for us, one, the awareness of how gifted we are to still be around, and two, to realize that the runway will eventually come to an end. So that the paintings, albeit about nature, are also very much focused on the nature of us as human beings. And you articulate them in your potted shed, in your tree that's growing, in the snow that's falling, in such an extraordinary, extraordinary way. Can we look at the next piece, please, Caroline? Wow. So Caroline, maybe you would begin just speaking briefly about this.
Yeah, there's,
Oh.
yes, can you hear me okay? Sorry
Yes, we
about
can.
Well, so one thing I keep returning to in my head, some of the best students I ever saw in art were STEM students. And I think one, it's because you don't have the pressure of trying to, you're enjoying what you're seeing, but I think also you're trained to really see something as it is. And that really comes through in this work. And I think, considering the emotional aspect as well, that sensitivity bringing to these landscapes is really what makes these come to life. This one in particular, what stands out to me is just this color and this light. The way that Geoff captures light really gives a sense of space and a sense of contrast between what's warm and hit by the light and what's cool. They're separated in this really particular way. And I kind of push, I guess that has to do with your experience with surgery, because you have to both isolate, but then consider the whole thing. And that's what painting is. I kind of wonder if that's something that you think about, Geoff, when you're working. There's the surgery field, but then there's the person, right? There's the disease, but then there's the life that's in it.
Well, there's definitely compartmentalization, but what the experience of painting and surgery had in common was when you're focused on it, you're really outside of time. You're outside of any other thoughts. Someone could drop a whole tray of instruments behind me. If I'm operating, I wouldn't even hear it. I could be out in the woods painting, and there are people hunting and guns going off all the time. When I'm looking and I'm engaged, I don't even notice it. So
hopefully you're wearing that orange color, that
I
beautiful
do.
little orange. You wear that out
No
there.
joke, I do.
Yeah. Oh, good. We wouldn't want to hear.
I would like to add something to this, because Mara before used a very important phrase, saying that there is no prettiness in these paintings, and I agree with her. There is beauty. There's a difference between prettiness and beauty. When I remember when I was a student in Paris, we had two concepts. One is yes, one is no. Is the picturesque and the pictorial. The picturesque is what tries somehow to attract the people because it's pretty. And the pictorial is something that speaks of something that says much more than only color and shape and is of a very different notion. I hear, for instance, in this painting, I was so attracted by the use of red, which is represented by an idea of leaves. But this red, first of all, brings the first plan forward, because the opposition of red and green, and this is done very knowingly as a painter by Geoff, that this comes here. But suddenly when I look at this painting, I saw what is happening under the ground. I saw a process of oxidation. I saw of something happening, of a certain life happening under the ground. So here a painting that can project all these senses, almost philosophical concepts of what happens above and below. I mean, this then becomes really much more than what we would expect from a board or a little canvas covered up with paint.
So Mara, your turn.
Okay, well, this is actually not an observation, but a question. I am completely drawn to the gray, lavender, purple palisade in the background, or is it a granite quarry in the background? It is so abstract. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm just intrigued
It's
what that landscape is, actually.
it's a cliff covered with trees and vegetation, and in the upper left corner, just adjacent to tree trunk, see a white line.
Yep.
That is just a view of Presque Isle Bay. That is water.
Yeah.
And then the land mass is on the other side of the bay.
Yeah. It's just that land, the chunkiness of the
Yes.
land and the very little feathering or tree above it. I was wondering.
It's very block-like.
Yeah.
I've had other paint I've done in Canada, and that question comes up: is that the Niagara Escarpment? Is that stone or those trees? And there really it could be both.
Well, it's so austere compared to all the vines and the clotted earth and the vegetation. It's so starkly different to me. I happen to have a thing for rocks. I think there's a lot of magic and energy in rock.
You're in Vermont, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Granite State.
No.
That's
no.
New Hampshire?
Granite State is New Hampshire.
That's right.
We do, it's not that we don't have granite, but we're known as the Marble State.
Oh,
One of the things as I listen to you and look at the work, Geoff, is that each piece is an experience that you had that you're able then to transform into a painting, and then it resonates differently with all of us, but there are similar themes in terms of both the spontaneity, the energy, the color of the light, and the composition that engage each one of us in a very particular way. And that, to me, is the hallmark of really a fine painting. So I think you should be complimented, but at the same time, we should move on. And this is quite a lovely departure. I don't remember in a lot of the slides that we've seen too many still life pieces, but this has a kind of presence and almost force that takes it well beyond still life. Sam, your thoughts?
I think, first of all, I admire here the geometry of this painting. I admire the diagonal part that represents architecture of the window, and then the shadows that fall on the table. I love the light that is seen on the leaves of the left upper corner of it. It's really beautiful. I can feel the outside. I must say, when I'm looking at all these paintings, they make me feel, because we'll see them on the screen of a computer, it makes me feel almost like looking at landscapes of Tiffany. The glass that shines and brings us light and makes us forget the physicality of what is in front of us. It is just unique and very personal, really very personal.
Mara, would you respond to this? This is clearly not landscape.
It's
but
clearly not landscape, but what fascinates me is it's both light through and light struck. the light source is coming from behind. So you have this actually sort of chunk of opacity dead center in the whole piece, which is fascinating to me that you could pull that off. Because it's backlit, there's a mystery, where most Dutch floral paintings are struck by light. This is more again like stained glass, as Sam referred to, and yet there's that slight diagonal shift in the light coming through that allows the side of the vase to be light struck as opposed to light through. And actually doing both of those things at once fascinates me.
So Geoff, I think you get an opportunity to just talk a bit about the idea of still life in the context of your work, and this particular piece as an example.
I love doing still life. One thing I love about it is you're not dealing with all the vicissitudes and rapid changes of nature, which is a challenge in itself. It's so contemplative. You can be so deliberate. This is like doing a very long, like a 6 or 8 hour complex cancer operation. And for me, still lifes are very personal. For me, these paintings of the amarilla. This is representative of my wife. This is her favorite flower.
Oh.
This is going into her favorite time of year. This was Thanksgiving time, and these particular amarillae were they were unusual color. They weren't the usual brilliant vermilion red and pink. They were more subtle shades. And as Mara pointed out, that's what struck me was the central darkness that did not sacrifice color and hue, but this penumbra, or this sort of halo of light around it, that caught my attention. And it's such a match for personal qualities of my wife that I care so much about. There's a certain mystery, there's a solidity and a force and a balance, and then there's this lovely light.
That's a beautiful tribute to Ellen in words, and the painting obviously reflects that as well. So thank you for sharing something as personal and intimate, and at the same time, very statuesque and a beautiful painting. Let's look at the next one, because there's such a wonderful contrast between the two, for me in any event. And Caroline, do you want to just talk briefly about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of a thought left over from the previous one because it's so strong. I'm going to bring it back to the things that are brought out, and then the things that are understated or tastefully underworked, as I called it earlier. What's important here is the looming quality of the trees, and then this contrasted with the brightness of these really puffy, beautiful clouds that also bring out the little bits of snow that you can feel have been sitting in the trees, but they might start to fall down. You look at the trees, and each branch isn't what's important. So there's just enough to suggest it, but then there's greater detail where it kind of kisses into the sky, so that information is brought to you, but it's not overworked. It's so much fun. The paintings are fun because you can explore around them. The mark making isn't consistent throughout it, so it's not boring. And also something about pretty much all of Geoff's work is, I love what Sam said, the pretty versus the pictorial. I'd almost say that it's easy, dare I say it, to make something pretty, but the pictorial is so much stronger because you have to, in this case, he hones in a very complex composition that could easily run away with itself by your eye just constantly going off in these different directions. But Geoff uses really subtle things to kind of keep you inside the paintings. It's really quite fun. It makes it fun to view them.
Can you put up the next piece as well? And then Sam, if you could talk about the two of them. I don't think we can do them back and forth, but if you'll talk a bit about this and then go back to the other, because essentially they're both snow scenes, but extraordinarily different, both in rhythm and in feeling.
What strikes me in these paintings, but also in many other paintings, is the musicality of the composition. I am listening to these paintings. The different shapes react to each other in a way that in a symphony, a given a given theme returns and returns and returns in variations, each one a personality in itself. And this is what happens here in these paintings. I look at the little spaces that are created between the branches and the sky, and each one has a character of its own. So we are speaking here of spontaneous work, and we are speaking of freshness, but at the same time, the precision of the painting is striking me as incredibly achieved. So I mean, there are not many works that leave me speechless. But this is certainly some of the stuff that you are producing that makes it.
Mara, can you respond to both images? Go back, if you would, Caroline, for a second to the first one.
Okay, so I like putting these images back to back because they're both in terms of their palette and the scene quite similar and yet radically different. But this one to me is, it's only 20 by 16 inches, and yet it has the power and certitude of brush making that a Klein painting has, which is completely abstract. And that you accomplish that in 20 by 16 inches just is remarkable to me. And then the other piece, just this almost Gothic cathedral of pines, and you know, I mean, there's just a tracery arch feeling, and the reflection coming down of the shadows is, you know, once again that the pattern of light coming through the trees, just as if you were in a cathedral. So you've got the light streaming in, and the pattern both of the mullions and the interior architecture hitting the ground. And then you've got this sort of soaring cathedral with the looking out through the stained glass. And it's a remarkably interesting architectured space for this wild place.
Thank you much, because I think it's very important in there, or there was an earlier snow piece as well. All of them have a different, essentially tune, and you need to be, not an intentional pun, attuned to where the painting is, so that you can then enter into the world that Geoff is inviting us into. Let's look at the next piece if we can. Geoff, I'd like you to talk about, because this is the other one with the structure, and you call it Condemned House. So I assume it's been either torn down by this time or has been renovated.
Well, it turned out that this was prophetic because it was torn down just like maybe 2 months after this was done. But this was a house I passed every day on the way to work. I would, you know, ride my bike, so I had time to really look at things. And I was always fascinated by it. And nobody had lived in this house for years. And one time I went by in winter, I said, I think it's time. And that little orange dot near the center of the painting that you see, where you see the area that's really dark,
Yes.
an orange dot, that is a poster saying that the building's been condemned. So what struck me was the contrast of the fire and the warmth of the sun giving this structure life, but at the same time, it's already receding into death. It's receding into the cold. But it was in a state of perfect balance. And that's normally I wouldn't divide a composition in half the way this is, right down the middle. That's really tough. That's like making a bow shot from a submarine. It took a lot of work to figure this out and to get it right. But it got it, I think. And it's a painting it's getting me interested in urban painting again.
Sam?
Yes, what strikes me here is the incredible balance between the orange on the right side and all the blue sky and the way they are balanced, these two complementary colors. But what I wanted to ask you, Geoff, is um, how uh, how do you work? Do you return to the things once they are done? Do you do them in one session and that's it? Um, I'm thinking of various painters of landscapes. Some used to work on the landscapes for months. Others did it only in one session. So can you speak a little about your technical approach to this work?
Generally, they're done over in this series. Each one of those paintings would be done over a period of weeks.
Yeah.
I have a system that I learned from my medical life. I have a recovery room. I have an ICU
That's
for
lovely.
for
Like,
paintings that
oh,
they're not doing well. They're critically ill. There's something really wrong. They're not ready. I haven't figured it out. Usually time will figure it, as it does in medical care. Time usually makes the final decision for a lot of things. And then I'll come into the painting ICU after might be a month or two, and suddenly I know exactly what needs to be done. I can see where the flaw or where the holdup was, and then it might finish very rapidly. And then I have a painting hospice. I have paintings that they're just not going to make it. They're just not, but I take care of them. I don't throw them out. I don't abandon them. But they're never going to make it to what I would feel is ready to share. There was some inherent problem that I just couldn't figure out.
This is to me very interesting because we share very much the same way of working, although the final product looks very different. But there is something that once you start a painting, it has a life of its own, and
Yes.
it is telling you, now let me go, let me take a rest, put me away, then return to me, try. So is the way I think it asks for, I guess, some humility to do that because unfortunately, what is very popular today is artists who do very quickly paintings. And the speed of producing was always a subject by itself. How fast could artists work? In the modern market, of course, it was because a lot of money is invested in promotion of artists. Artists should produce a lot and do it very quickly as possible. In this, for instance, I want to say is there is a fantastic artist, a landscape painter called Anselm Kiefer. He's a German
Good.
artist, does very impressive works. I saw a documentary on how his works. His atelier is the size of a hangar that could take in two international, translational planes. There are, I don't know how many dozen of people working for him. Everything is produced industrially for museums that are waiting for Kiefer and are waiting for enormous paintings of his. So you see, we are kind of representing this kind of very old-fashioned idea of an artist who works by himself on his little paintings.
Right.
History will judge all these things. And anyway, history, do I really care about history? Do you care about history? Knowing that one day you won't be there and you won't really care very much what happens to history? I don't know. I mean, these are all kinds of things about which we can only have philosophical conversations.
Well,
But it is the small size. The small sizes are something also very important. Morandi, for instance, exists only in small
Mm.
sizes. And Morandi was sometimes producing 5 paintings a day, not simply because the market needed it, because he felt that by just doing these bottles slightly like this or slightly to the left, slightly to the right, it changed the world for him. So, I mean, it is wonderful that we have art history that keeps company to us, and
Yeah.
we can look and we can learn and also appreciate thanks to the work of all these artists. It's yesterday I had a visit here of a musician, and I asked her, how is it that people play Vivaldi in so many different ways? Well, she says, because Vivaldi, he just wrote some outlines. And therefore, centuries and centuries, artists were interpreting him, transcribing him. And what you can hear today are various transcriptions of Vivaldi. And I feel sometimes that in my own work, I also do transcriptions of other artists.
I just wanted to say, Geoff, to put this all in context, that Sam has had a number of documentaries done about him, and he's called the painter of questions. So certainly, he certainly has raised a number for you, and at the same time provided some of his answers. Let us move on to the next piece if we can. Wonderful, thank you.
Wow.
So, Mara, if you could guide us through this plowed field.
Wow. Just this painting has a circular motion, and it's almost like you know that the giant machinery has clomped through it and it's clotted. And but it's so alive. It's so that the man-made is implied. Somebody's clomped through here either with a machine or with a horse or a tractor trailer or something. So it's an earth painting, and yet all those puddles reflect this gray sky, this gray blue sky. And I don't know, it's like I felt dug into this painting. You dug into the smell, dug into the stickiness of the earth, and the richness of the soil. And it's so active, and yet it's got such a limited palette. I think it's masterful how you could get so much out of so little. Okay.
Geoff, your thoughts?
Well, that's what my wife said. I stopped the car. I was absolutely mesmerized by this. And she said, "What is the matter with you? You're going to paint that?" I said, I can't not paint it. It says everything I would want to say in something so simple and so understated. I just absolutely love it. I love it's spring. I love the promise of growth. Mara's right about the circle. It's the circularity of the seasons, where the ground depends on the sky and the water from the sky for the next cycle of growth, which is what it's all about, hope. So yeah, I agree. It was a challenge to make sure don't be too fussy. Don't be too fussy. But don't be too abstract either.
Let's move on to the very last piece. And Caroline, would you begin?
Absolutely. This piece is really quite, I'm mesmerized by, and I'm often not by sky paintings, but how the tree starts to, it's almost like lifting up in the sky, and how you've given this quality of character to the tree. And that's something you do. You put characters into especially trees. I know there is one painting that I think sold at the last exhibition you did, where it reminded you of your father, Geoff, and I wonder, this one has such a character. I wonder if the tree itself, if it is, it might be that same tree, because I think it was a Norwegian spruce that you talked about, but wondering if this one had any specific meaning behind it. The
Geoff?
person.
This is a stunning, huge, solitary Norwegian spruce. It's in my personal iconography, evergreens are sort of equate death and eternity. It's really one thing. It's not either or, it's both. And of course, this is poised on the edge of a cliff over which we don't have any control. But in the distance is a very pacific, calm Lake Erie, which has the capacity to be very disturbed. But this is a glorious, early fall day. But the tree is almost like a sentinel. It's sort of, it provides guidance. I look at the tree and I can tell by which way it's moving what the weather in the next 24 hours is going to be like. This isn't very far from where that plowed earth spring painting was. It's less than a mile from there. So this whole world that's been unfolding is all within a short distance, every one of them.
But these are all distances, spaces, places, trees, fields that you have made your own through your work and through your observation of what is around you. And it becomes then yours. And in the process of being yours, then you translate it for us. And the sense I'm getting from the conversation as well is the energy that you have invested, the capacity to observe, which is part of your other training as a surgeon, all come together in such a profoundly joyous and meaningful way. Mara, would you speak briefly about this?
Well, this painting to me is classic Geoffrey Dunn. It is just classic. Where the clotted earth painting is, wow, look what he did there. That's new. But the way this is classic for me is one of my favorite writers is a Maine writer. She's very specific to Maine, very specific to place. And it's Sarah Orne Jewett, and she wrote a book called The Country of the Pointed Firs. And she is just such an original, and she has such a personal voice and such a way of painting with words, place. And I think she's a classic. And Geoffrey, I think you're a classic. You like, this place is your place. The specificity of this place is also universal. And it's majestic. You exalt it. You'll put exaltations to it. And the same way that Sarah Orne Jewett, which I think is one of our great American masters, is. So that's what I have to say about you, young man.
Yeah. What do you think of that? Sam, your thoughts?
Well, I agree. I mean, I love listening to you. What struck me here is the power of the huge tree, which seems to be stable, while behind, I feel, is a wind.
Mm-hmm.
And these two contradictions I also felt in the structure. If you look at the left upper part of the painting, the leaves of the tree created very defined diagonal line, which is straight, while below there is almost a perfect circle. The upper part of the paintings makes me think of a cone, and the lower part of the painting makes me think of the shape of a globe. And this somehow brings me back to the geometry that Cézanne taught, saying artists should see everything in geometrical shapes of cones, triangles, squares, and so on.
Rods.
So it seems to me that there is a feeling for geometry or a knowledge of geometry, a subconscious space of geometry or a conscious, and I don't know. But this is absolutely not important to know. It is in the painting. It is in the painting, and it's what gives the painting its power.
Geoff, would you like to say one thing or two?
Thank you, everybody, for seeing things I would have never been able to see in my own work. It's provided a lot of reassurance, and it's made the whole definitely made the whole undertaking worth it. Every one of them has been kind of a struggle in its own way, but I'm happy to report that the complication rate and the mortality rate of the series is pretty low, lower than the last series, than the last exhibition. But I don't think that would have happened without your support and your insight and your guidance.
Let me just conclude by thanking all of you for an absolute joyful ride for me. Just sitting here and seeing each of the paintings afresh through your incredible interest in and capacity to not only see, but to articulate what you see. There's Thomas's quote is amazing how much art depends on seeing. There are people who look but do not see, people who listen but do not hear, people who read but do not understand. And my sense of this gathering today is that we have all been blessed with the opportunity to see more clearly, to appreciate better, and to feel uplifted by what you have created, Geoff. So thank you, Caroline. Thank you as well. All of you. It was just a joy and delight to be together.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Look forward to
Bye-bye.
seeing you.
Be
Nice
well.
to